The first time I saw Jim, I was sitting in the lobby of a large corporation waiting for a job interview. He swaggered into the lobby, walked over to the receptionist, flirted with her for a minute or two, and sauntered out again. And I thought to myself, I hope I get this job. Well, I did get the job, and although we didn't have any occasion to work together, because it was, again, a large corporation, sometimes he would work on things with some of my coworkers. And when he would walk into the department, it was as if I could sense him before I could hear him or see him. And it was just something about the way he carried himself. And it always reminded me of the old Pretenders song, Don't Get Me Wrong. I see neon lights whenever you walk by. But I should point out that he was just really an office crush. I was dating somebody, I'd been dating somebody for about a year, we were getting kind of serious, and so I really didn't think about Jim outside of work. Well, about a year later, there was a company picnic, and he was there and I was there. And we were both solo. He had apparently just broken up with somebody, and my boyfriend and I were having a little bit of a tough time, and my boyfriend had decided not to come. By the end of the picnic, I'd had a fair amount to drink, and we were flirting, or I was flirting pretty shamelessly, but he really was not picking up on it. So that was that. About a few weeks later, by this time my boyfriend and I had broken up, and Jim and I were finally assigned to the same project, and the sparks were really flying. So about a week later, we went out on our first date. And it was actually fairly low-key. We double dated with a friend of mine and his brother. And by the end of the evening, we were sitting at his place, and we were sitting on the couch listening to some music when I excused myself to go to the bathroom. When I came back, he wasn't there anymore. And after looking around for a while, I discovered him in his bedroom, on his waterbed, passed out. Apparently he'd had a little bit too much to drink. So I tried to rouse him, but he was out cold. And this put me in a little bit of a jam because I had no way of getting home. So this was out in the suburbs, and he had picked me up. So there was no bus, there was no L. I don't even think I had enough money for a cab fare. I started racking my brain, trying to think of who I could call to come pick me up at like midnight. And full disclosure, this was in the days before cell phones, so the only person I could think about to call was my girlfriend, who was out with his brother. And there was nobody I could call to come pick me up at midnight. So I tried to wake him up again, still no luck, and I thought, well, this is going to be really awkward if I spend the night here. And he wakes up and is like, hey, what are you doing here? And where am I going to sleep? And so I decided my only best option was to take his car. So I had to get home. I wasn't going to spend the whole night there, right? So I wrote him a note and said, hey Jim, sorry, I had to get home, so I took your car, and we can figure out tomorrow I can get your car back to you. So I drove the car home. Next day I got up, and I hadn't heard from him, and finally I needed to go out. It was like in the afternoon, and so I called and left him a message, so I didn't actually get him on the phone, and said, hey, I've got to go run some errands, and I think you probably want your car, but I don't know, maybe I'll just leave the keys under the mat for you. I'll leave the door unlocked, it'll be out in front of my apartment, I'll leave the keys under the mat, and you can come get it if you need to. And remember, this is suburbs, so no real risk of the car being stolen. And I came back later, and the car was gone, and I didn't hear from him. So for about the next week, I didn't hear from him. I talked to my girlfriend, and she said, he's probably really embarrassed, but he passed out on you. So probably about the Friday of the following week, there was a happy hour, work happy hour. I went, he showed up, and after a little while he walked over and he kind of sheepishly apologized and asked if I would go out with him again. Now, if some young woman told me this story, I would say, run far away, do not go out with this person again. This is not a good sign. If he's passing out on you on your first date, it's only going to go downhill. But I was 23 and I was was smitten, and he asked so nicely. And so we went out again, and he didn't pass out on me this time. And we continued to date, and he actually turned out to be a really sweet guy, and he was very attentive, was always buying me flowers, sending me notes. Those of you who remember inter-office mail, he used to send me little notes through the mail. He wrote me poems, and he came up with a song for us, which was Blue Sky by the Allman Brothers. You're my blue sky, you're my sunny day. And besides just being a really considerate, attentive guy, he was really close with his family, which I liked. And in fact, he even would go out shopping for his elderly grandmother once a week. On Fridays, he would go and he would buy her groceries, and he'd usually cook her dinner, and sometimes I would join him. The only person who didn't like him a whole lot was my mother. She didn't feel like he was good enough for me, you know, as sometimes the moms will be, and she never really took to him very well. Well, after about 2 years of dating, he had moved home. He had had a roommate, but moved home because the roommate was getting married, and we were talking about possibly moving in together and getting married, and slept over one night, and there was a knock about 5 in the morning. His stepfather knocking on the door saying, "Jim, I need your car keys. They're here to repossess your car." And he left for a couple minutes, and he came back, and I said, "Why is your car getting repossessed?" And he gradually told me that apparently he hadn't been paying his car payments. He'd been taking his paycheck and using it to buy Coke. He was a cocaine addict. And I was completely stunned and floored. I had no idea that this had been going on. And I went to work that day. I came back, talked with him, I broke up with him, and I just was completely blown away because I honestly had no idea, but it started to, there's certain things that seemed to add up all of a sudden. So he was always going to the bathroom, and he would joke about having a small bladder, but apparently he used to keep his stash in his shaving kit in the bathroom. He also seemed to sniffle a lot, and I would say to him, "You know, it seems like you've had a lot of colds lately. You really should go to the doctor." And he's like, "Yes, you know, I really should." And I found out he'd been lying about all kinds of things, to me, to his family. In fact, those nights at Grandma's weren't his nights at Grandma's, actually. He was going out with his other cokehead friends. So I found out all these things, and I was pretty much devastated because I honestly had no clue. You know, we used to like to have a few drinks, but I had no idea that he was a cocaine addict. So people would say to me, "Well, Kirsten, you must have known. Come on, you're in denial. You were hiding it from yourself. Come on." And I would say, "You know, I really didn't. Maybe the signs were there and I should have known, but I didn't know. His family didn't know." Addicts are actually really good at keeping secrets and hiding things even from themselves. And the only person who knew, it turned out, was his roommate, Mark, because Mark would sometimes find his stash, you know, under the couch or something when he was cleaning. And so at one point I talked to Mark and said, "You know, why didn't you say something to me? You knew we were talking about getting married. Didn't you think I should know about this? It's a pretty big thing. Excuse me." And he said, "Well, you know, I guess I should have said something, but I was going to try to help him. I was going to try to get him into treatment and all this stuff. And plus I thought, you know, well, you know what you don't know can't hurt you." And I said, "You know, actually it really can. In fact, it really can." And so this breakup really kind of set me into this depression because this was one in a series of things that had happened. So at the beginning of the year, I had lost my job due to a merger, so my job was eliminated. And then a few months later, my sister died of breast cancer. And then this happened. It was the third in a series of losses. And so it was, I kind of went into this pit of despair for, almost 2 years. And for the next 6 months, Jim would call me up and say, "Okay," and initially he said, "You know what, I'm going into treatment. I'm joining a 12-step program. I'm going to Narcotics Anonymous." And he did, apparently. And we tried to get together a few times. It's like, "I've changed. I'm a new person now, I'm working the steps. And I really, really wanted to believe him, but I just couldn't. I felt so betrayed. It was as if he had been cheating on me. Well, so it took a while, but probably a good 2 years or so after we'd broken up, I was finally sort of getting back on my feet, and I just met somebody I wanted to start dating, and who calls me but Jim. And now it's been 2 years. I haven't talked to him in probably a year and a half, and he's still apparently in Narcotics Anonymous, wants to know if I want to see him, and I debated, right? I mean, he had lied to me all that time, but on the other hand, okay, he'd been in treatment apparently, shouldn't I see him? So I did. We went out a few times, and there was still a spark there, but really I realized that he wasn't really the right guy for me after all. My mom had actually been right. We just didn't have what it would take to sustain a marriage or anything like that. So we kind of kept in touch for a little while longer. He actually ended up getting married. And a few years later, I met my husband, Chris, and who actually did turn out to be the right guy for me. And my mom loved him. And we have 2 kids, and I know that this is the way that things were really supposed to be. But sometimes I'll hear someone say, oh, what you know can't hurt you. And I think to myself, it can, yes, it really can.